August 1st, 1941. A humid wind rolled across the airfield at Bethpage, Long Island. Chief Engineer Robert Hall tightened his grip on the control stick. Ahead of him, a machine unlike any other shuddered down the runway. It was massive, round, and awkward. Mechanics held their breath. It looked too heavy to fly, too strange to survive. But as the barrel-shaped fuselage lifted into the sky, its shadow stretched across the ground like the birthmark of a new era. Few people realized that this ungainly creature, the Grumman XTBF-1, would one day become the most lethal ship killer in American history. 2 years earlier, the U.S. Navy had made a desperate demand: a torpedo bomber faster, tougher, and with a longer range than anything in the fleet. The old Douglas Devastator was a relic, slow, fragile, and obsolete. The Navy's new requirements bordered on madness: a top speed of 300 miles per hour, a 1,000-mile range, a 3-man crew, an internal bomb bay, armor plating, self-sealing fuel tanks, and a power-operated turret. No aircraft had ever carried that much complexity into the air. 13 companies tried to make it work. Only 2 got close: Vaught's sleek XTBU-1 and Grumman's strange, bloated XTBF-1. Vaught won the initial contract, but their factory was buried under Corsair production. So the Navy turned to Grumman, a smaller company that now faced an impossible puzzle: build the most advanced torpedo bomber ever made, or fail in front of the entire fleet. Engineer Robert Hall spent sleepless nights chasing the impossible. How do you fit a full-size torpedo inside an aircraft without making it too heavy to even take off? The bomb bay had to carry a torpedo or 4 500-pound bombs and open cleanly mid-flight without jamming. Then came the nightmare of the power turret. Manual systems were too weak, hydraulics were too slow, and electric systems were largely untested. Grumman gambled everything on electricity. But there was another huge problem: the wings. The Avenger's massive 54-foot span wouldn't fit on carrier elevators. Legend has it that Grumman's founder, Leroy Grumman, sat in his office one night, twisting paper clips and using a pink eraser as a mock fuselage. Within minutes, he discovered the ingenious folding wing mechanism that would define Grumman aircraft for decades. The wings folded backward and upward at the same time, like a bird tucking itself into land. Every innovation added weight: armor, hydraulics, reinforced frames. The plane ballooned into a flying fortress. To lift it, they needed serious power. The Wright R2600 engine, the most powerful radial available, became the heart of the beast. And when the prototype finally took off that August morning, it lumbered into the air like a truck, heavy, reluctant, but unbreakable. Pilots complained about stiff controls, poor visibility, and sluggish turns. Yet the systems worked flawlessly. Hall had built a machine that simply refused to quit. Then tragedy struck. On November 28, 1941, the prototype caught fire mid-flight. Hall and his co-pilot bailed out just seconds before it exploded. The wreckage burned across the New York marshes as critics pounced. It was too complicated, too dangerous, too late. The Navy should cancel it, they said. Grumman did the opposite. They accelerated. Just weeks after Pearl Harbor, in January 1942, the first production Avengers rolled out of the factory. By June, more than 100 were ready, just in time for the Battle of Midway. 6 Avengers took off from Midway Island that morning, flown mostly by volunteers. These were young men, few with real combat hours, heading straight toward the largest carrier fleet the world had ever seen. The sky turned into a slaughterhouse. Japanese Zeros tore them apart before they could even line up for their attack. Only one aircraft returned. Its pilot, Ensign Albert Ernest, was pale and bleeding, his Avenger riddled with holes. One crewmate was dead, another clinging to life. It had taken 9 20mm hits and 60 machine gun rounds. The hydraulics were gone, the radio was silent, yet the turret still turned. Critics called Midway proof of the Avenger's failure, but engineers saw something different. They saw proof of its survival. The Avenger had brought its crew home when no other plane would have. By August, Avengers filled new Navy squadrons, including a reborn Torpedo Squadron 8, the same squadron number that had been wiped out at Midway. In the Solomon Islands, they proved their name true, sinking the Japanese carrier Ryujo. At Guadalcanal, they struck again, sinking the battleship Hiei. The Avenger was fast becoming the Navy's premier ship killer, but its deadliest chapter came far from the Pacific, over the grey, cold Atlantic. As German U-boats strangled Allied shipping, Avengers launched from tiny escort carriers, hunting the submarines that stalked the convoys. They carried radar, depth charges, and new acoustic torpedoes. Between 1943 and 1945, Avengers destroyed or helped destroy 35 U-boats, more than any other aircraft in the war. The plane built to kill battleships had become the ocean's most efficient submarine hunter. By 1944, Grumman couldn't keep up with demand. General Motors joined production, building 3 times as many Avengers as the original factory. New variants appeared with radar domes, rockets, and extra armor. The Avenger evolved into a flying toolbox of destruction. That June, during the Battle of the Philippine Sea, Avengers helped unleash what pilots later called the Marianas Turkey Shoot. That night, they flew farther than ever before, striking Japanese carriers in darkness, guided only by the flicker of flames on the horizon. Many never returned, lost to running out of fuel, to weather, to the blackness of the Pacific. But the mission's success proved something haunting. The Avenger's endurance outlasted even the men who flew it. 4 months later, in the chaos of Leyte Gulf, the largest naval battle in history, Avengers flew headlong into the storm. Outnumbered, outgunned, and out of time, they attacked Japanese battleships with small bombs and immense courage. Their torpedoes crippled Musashi, a 72,000-ton monster once thought unsinkable. 5 months later, her sister ship, the Yamato, followed her to the bottom of the ocean, overwhelmed by Avenger strikes. The age of the battleship had ended, not by naval guns, but by the wings of a plane once mocked as too heavy to fly. By the war's end, nearly 10,000 Avengers had been built. They sank 12 carriers, 6 battleships, 19 cruisers, 25 destroyers, and 30 submarines, over 1 million tons of enemy shipping. Yet most of their missions were not glory-soaked assaults. They were the quiet ones, escorting convoys, bombing bunkers, and rescuing downed pilots. One of those pilots was a young man named George H.W. Bush. Flying a TBM Avenger named Barbara, he was shot down over Chichijima in 1944. He completed his bombing run before bailing out into the sea, where he was alone for hours until rescued by a submarine. For his courage, he earned the Distinguished Flying Cross, and decades later, his name would grace a U.S. Navy supercarrier. When the war ended, the Avenger had flown more than 46,000 combat sorties with one of the lowest loss rates of any aircraft, just 1.58%. Every unnecessary system that critics had mocked had saved lives. The electric turret worked faster than any hydraulic model. The folding wings transformed carrier aviation. The internal bomb bay made it endlessly adaptable for bombing, scouting, rescuing, and even radar surveillance. After the war, Avengers served into the 1950s across the world, from Canada to Japan, France to the Netherlands. Some became early warning planes, the ancestors of modern AWACS. Their final combat legacy came indirectly in Korea, when the same torpedoes once dropped by Avengers were used in the last aerial torpedo attack in history. By then, the Avengers' legacy was sealed, nearly 10,000 built, 1 million tons of enemy steel sunk, and a design philosophy that would shape generations of aircraft, complexity not for vanity, but for survival. The Avenger was never graceful, never elegant, but it was loyal. It carried men into the heart of chaos and brought them home. In war, perfection isn't beauty, it's endurance, and in that sense the Grumman Avenger was perfect, Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this look into aviation history, be sure to hit that like button and subscribe for more stories like this one. See you in the next video.